Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Alaka with Torrey Hills Capital, and welcome to the StageZero Life Sciences webcast from March 10th, 2022. Hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are very excited to bring you a unique company in a space that is expected to grow dramatically for the foreseeable future. StageZero Life Sciences is a vertically integrated healthcare company positioned to be an industry leader in the early detection and management of a wide range of cancers and other chronic diseases. The company's patented Sentinel Principle technology is the first of its kind mRNA multi-cancer panel used to screen for multiple cancers with a single sample of blood. We feel that the company's platform for early detection, along with monitoring and treatment through its AVERT program, will be instrumental in greater overall survival rates. StageZero also offers a wide range of COVID testing options. StageZero Life Sciences trades on the OTC market under the ticker SZLSF, and on the TSX exchange under the ticker symbol SZLS. The company shares are currently trading with a market cap of just under 20 million US. So based on the size of the addressable market and the company's opportunity for growth, we feel there is plenty of upside in the stock. As Rebecca and I were just discussing, this market pullback we think has created a pretty solid opportunity here. With us today to discuss StageZero Life Sciences and the company's strategy going forward is the company's chairman and CEO, James Howard-Tripp, CFO, Matt Pietras, and head of investor relations, Rebecca Greco. We also have our resident expert at Torrey Hills Capital in all things biotech, Dr. Mark Swaim. It's great to have you all on today, and welcome to our virtual lunch. Thanks for taking the time to bring our viewers up to speed on StageZero Life Sciences. A lot of great things happening with the company, obviously. But before we get started, I just want to mention, if our viewers have questions during the presentation, simply type them into the Q&A or chat box, and we'll make sure they get answered. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Swaim for some opening comments, and then Matt and James will take us through the presentation. Then we'll open it up for Q&A. So with that said, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anthony. We've really enjoyed working several weeks with StageZero, and a lot of my role here is just try to open the presentation with maybe something of a zinger or an anecdote that kind of encapsulates the real take-home message, the most important thing to take away. Of course, there are several such messages with a company like this, but I was reading something online. It may have been in Wall Street Journal recently. That the title of the article was "Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person." I'm like, wow, that's pretty. I mean, it did happen to me. They were right, but pretty fatalistic, And it kind of reminded me though of another investor relations group meeting we were having with someone, Anthony, who it was, but somebody sort of wanted to kind of draw the zoom lens wide and just kind of ask the question, are we really making any headway on the war on cancer? And I said, to be candid, no, we really aren't. I don't know that the outcomes have really radically improved in my lifetime. There are things that we cure now and again. Mostly they're Pyrrhic victories. Mostly we score a lot of base hits. Mostly we spend enormous amounts of money for things that disappoint, like checkpoint inhibitors. Sorry, but they fail 80% of the time. A lot of money, And so does that mean the situation is destitute, form without void, hopeless? No, it doesn't. I mean, it's the one kind of company in the firmament right here that actually does have a plausible, tangible answer, a durable answer. Listen to what the message is here. It is that, the answer always is early detection. You catch these things when they're so embryonic, so infantile, that they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're easily gotten rid of, easily purged. You can easily declare a limited preemptive strike on something that's at stage 0, stage 1, and got a pretty good chance of winning. And there are several anecdotes I've told from clinical practice over the years of people who eerily, by mistake stumbled onto a situation where they really did have a tumor picked up that should have killed them, picked up early, they walk away scot-free. Now, how this company is doing this, they'll talk about the detection system they have. It's novel, it's original. Please pay close attention to it because it's cool, really. They've done some original legwork there, and I'm proud of them for that. Glad to represent them on that basis. And then likewise, they have a kind of practice-based oncology approach to things that, the analogy I've used with Anthony is like, Anthony, if you came to me with cancer, I can give you two options. One is the flow diagram. I'm going to tick boxes and take care of you according to this great flow chart, or a personalized approach that, only Anthony Alaka gets it. Which would you rather have? I mean,
Yep.
you know,
Of course,
and,
yeah.
you see where I'm going with that. And you see, you go to StageZero, you're going to get a bespoke approach to things, and I like that. And I think as we move forward, it's gonna come to that everywhere. It kind of has to, because the system is broken. Nobody's satisfied in the main with the care that they're getting. We need some radical fixes. This is one of the most interesting ones I've ever heard. So I think I'll kind of cap my remarks at that and pass it on to James or Matthew or Rebecca, and we'll just have a little discussion about StageZero. Welcome, people, to the program. Good to have you.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's James speaking, and so we'll pick it up, I think, exactly where you have left it off, and it's why we're constituted the way that we are, and so what I'll do, is we'll begin to work through some of what we perceive to be the problems out there, of why we're constituted in the way that we are. The first thing, of course, is I'm always ask everyone to please pay attention to the forward-looking statements. We will be making forward-looking statements, and we would ask you just to make sure that you have read this disclaimer. Next slide, Rebecca. Thank you. So the very, very interesting thing, I mean, all of this happened before COVID, or at least started before COVID. The need to find early diagnosis, to find diseases early, to get the diagnosis as early as possible is not new. We've known that for a while. The issue is not many people have been doing it. We were working with one of the extremely large healthcare systems in Pittsburgh. They were looking to begin to work with us just prior to COVID coming on, and then of course everything went on hold. But if I walk you back through all of this, there were a series of things that came out of this as we went through. One is they looked at what we had done and the data we'd put together, and the comments were, we haven't seen data as good as this. We haven't seen people do as much of this. So that was reassuring to see. The second thing is that it solved a whole series of problems for them that they hadn't been able to solve. All about, and it ran everything from not only finding diseases early, but it was taking it through the full system. It was being able to get effective treatments. And then we moved to working with the sister group, same city. And then we actually did a health economic study where we looked at taking one of our tests and replacing a whole series of procedures that they did within theirs. And we wanted to see whether it would be, one, a better outcome, two, would it be more cost effective. And in actual fact, that's exactly what we showed. It would very definitely lead to a better outcome, and it was hugely cost effective. COVID messed a lot of this up. As COVID begins to recede, we're all going back to those pieces, but it drives through. So key for us is, yes, you have to find it early. Everything you do, you have to find it early. In our case, that's the Sentinel Principle platform. I'll talk a lot more about that. And of course, that's Aristotle. And Aristotle is the pan-cancer test that we work. But we've also added to that the additional components that Mark was talking about, which is you looked at how you need to deliver this. And for example, 1/3 of American citizens under the age of 50 do not have a primary care physician. I'll say that again, 1/3 of American citizens do not have a primary care physician. They guide a lot of their own treatment in terms of where it is, at least as they begin the path. In states like Arizona, the patient can ask to have a test done. They don't need physician authorization. We are legally obligated to actually do that. You go to the fact that when you look at healthcare coverage, and we look at what we've gone through with our own company, healthcare premiums have doubled in the last 4 years. The average American family of four spends something like $18,000 out of pocket on healthcare each year. It's becoming unaffordable. People are therefore going to high deductibles. As a result of high deductibles, they're choosing where to spend the money in the beginning. And we're starting to watch this entire move towards early detection. In addition to that, telehealth has featured hugely in all of this. We're going to pick up on all of these themes as we move forward. Those were the problems that we needed to address. I think in addition to this, the old way of launching products, which is to go and hire 1,000 reps, throw them at the marketplace and see what sticks, is no longer valid. It went out the window with COVID. It was beginning to diminish before that. We're watching everyone rethink that model as it goes forward. We like to think that we've got a head start on everyone. Rebecca, next slide, please. So the way we see the future of healthcare is a little, again, of what Mark was talking about. It needs to be, one, heavily focused on early detection, but two, it needs to be somewhat bespoke. And so it's not one size fits all. And if we had some of our physicians online, one of our physicians was describing to a group of us a little while ago that he has patients that present with prostate cancer that have extremely high PSA readings, for example, before going in for surgery. What they do is they begin to work with us on our programs, and they see an almost dramatic drop in that PSA level. And this is even before they go for surgery. You then tie in with the programs that are adjunctive to standard of care, and you look for better outcomes. Each of these is tailored to the individual. We pull that forward into the AVERT program, where the AVERT program is entirely focused on early disease prevention, utilizes not only Aristotle and our other cancer tests, but uses a bespoke metabolic panel to look at the metabolic pathways underlying all of these diseases, and you move from there. So that's what we're about, all bound by telehealth. It's improving cancer and chronic disease outcomes through early detection and intervention. Next slide. We'll talk a lot about these because they're actually all tied together. But it's the reason that we acquired Care Oncology. As we were beginning to build up and look at how we would work with various groups, take very large employers, for example. Remember, all of this was just leading into the point at which COVID started to arrive. We were working with a number of extremely large groups, but the most common question we were getting back is, okay, if we look to deploy Aristotle, and we were getting extremely good acceptance of Aristotle at the point we would launch, they were saying, how are you going to work with our employees and their physicians? And they said, can you, if we've got tens of thousands of employees, can you go to each employee's physician, get them educated on what the results are and what the path should be? And the answer to that was no, not possible. When COVID arrived, that became an absolute impossibility. And so you needed a different solution. The way we're currently constituted does that. Aristotle will not only find it, Treat will work together with you, should you have it, in order to look at better outcomes. AVERT is the additional program if you flag with any amber or red signals that need amelioration. And so it is that aspect of being able to take it. Now, as we sit with employers, for example, it works. And then as I go down the health economic side, it obviously ties back to the cost effectiveness as well. Next slide. We put it together in pretty much this way. So everything sits on the base of telehealth. We do have physical clinics. We've got a clinic in Harley Street. We've got a physical presence in LA. We've got a physical presence in Richmond. We're building a whole series of additional physical presences around the country. Not everyone wants to go via telehealth, but telehealth allows you amazingly broad reach. It essentially means we can get to anyone, anywhere. And so telehealth for us has been critical. We start with Aristotle, as we talked about, which is a single blood test that would look at multiple cancers. From there, we have our own oncologist. We have our own physicians outside of even the oncology side. We work with dietitians, for example, as well. We're now working with a group of cardiologists as that drives through all of those work. We can drive you through to doing nothing with you. Simply result is negative, go home, relax. If you're positive, we can work with you on the COC protocol. If you're amber, as we said, amber or flag towards red, we can work with you in AVERT. And of course, we have the ability to push you through additional testing. It's a very unique patient proposition.
Quick question, James. Did I read yesterday that when you referred to a clinical presence in Richmond, you're speaking of Richmond, Virginia, not British Columbia, is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, we're just outside Washington. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I don't know why I had not been clear on that. My goof. Good to know though. Thanks.
Yeah, no, by all means. Rebecca, next slide. 2021, last year, was an amazing year for us. In actual fact, the last 2 years have been pretty incredible. COVID, everything comes down to what was there with COVID. Everything became immeasurably harder to do. You needed 3 times the amount of effort and time in order to get to the same place. But COVID for us was actually good. It stress tested our system. It gave us very good revenue. It actually allowed us to work with an amazing number of large companies, including the US government. And it really allowed us to see what it is that we could do. We went from doing hundreds of tests to doing thousands of tests. And of course, that's always good. We closed the Care Oncology acquisition in September of last year, and we've pretty much fully integrated everything. The last of the pieces are going into place right now. And by that, it's more of the formational aspect of making sure that all of the teams work fully together. But it's come together very quickly, and the Care Oncology group has been very, very helpful in all of that. Last year, 2021, we launched Aristotle in the US and in the greater Toronto area. We've really begun to build on that very strongly, particularly pushing it out quite broadly across the US. And so we're looking for very, very good things as we move forward. I'll talk during this about, I think, the approaches that we're getting. Our issue at the moment almost is trying to figure out how to deal with all the opportunities that are actually being placed in front of us. We've launched AVERT as a full program in the US. It's literally right now going out in a very expansive manner. We will be taking it out in the UK in the very short term. We'll be taking it into Canada as well. And then from there, we move to the European Union. We took our lab in Richmond, and because it was there, we wanted to see if we could use it as a sort of clinic adjunct, and could we use it as a full draw site? Could people would simply walk in and get tested? We've done that. We started with COVID. We've now expanded it into Aristotle and the other blood tests, and it's actually working well. We've shown that, as I mentioned earlier, that we can put together really good relationships. I'll pick on Sobeys here, for example. Sobeys has 1,500 stores, about approximately 400 of them have drugstores in them. We're in all of those stores. Rexall, a little smaller than that, but Rexall, an extremely large pharmacy group as well. We're working with them. You need to not just think COVID in terms of where it can go. You need to think about where else we can take it. We're part of the IATA system. We do testing for Aruba. We do testing for Barbados. We do testing for the US State Department. We tested Maricopa County. And in Maricopa County, we were testing 6 days a week, 5 different locations, 2 different sites on each of the locations. And we made it work. Thousands of tests, and we made the entire logistical piece work. So all of those have worked extremely well. So it goes back to, as I said, stress tested that we can actually do this. We've commenced trading on OTC QB. This is part of our build out into the US. We make no secret that we'd like to be big board listed. That if appropriate will come. We're big board in Toronto on the TSX, so that works extremely well. The acquisition has allowed us to fairly dramatically expand the management team and to also begin to expand the board of directors. That will continue as we build out, and Matt Pietras, who will do the second part of this presentation, is part of the new team that's come in. And Matt is an absolute breath of fresh air, huge experience, and it builds that way. We continue to raise money. We'll talk about that. We don't think that we've ever seen anyone launch the major kind of products that we're talking about with tiny, tiny amounts of money. So therefore, we know that we need to have adequate resources in order to do this. And so that's why we've continued to raise money as we push it out. And we've got a very novel scientific advisory board, and I'll talk to that in a moment. Next slide. So this is just a brief view. Matt and I, you know, Dr. Mendez actually leads the clinic side for us in the US. Dr. Vamadavan is our clinical lead. He's a clinical pharmacologist, heavily involved in cancer, heavily involved in not only clinical work, but research. And so actually an amazing individual for us. Dr. Brill is an oncologist. Sorry, not an oncologist, a gastroenterologist, huge depth of experience, amazing in terms of the guidance that he can give us. And this is just a small selection of what we have. And I think you can look at the listing on the bottom, you can see where we've come from. We've by and large all been there and done this before. Next slide. So this is the SAB. One doesn't always agree with having SABs, and if you are going to have one, don't have one where they're just names on the wall. They need to be people that are intimately working with you, whose guidance you want to use, and this is exactly that kind of group. The three that you see there, Doctors Fung, Boyd, and Bickman, are all notable experts in the field of metabolic pathway diseases, particularly as they lead to cancer. They're all extremely well published. And it's that latter piece that they're working with on us more than anything else. And so if we have a following of 100 and Dr. Fung has a following of 1 million, you can see how you get to have the expansion that drives through. And they're equally as committed as we are to the early diagnosis aspect. And so it works extremely well. We're doing a series of podcasts with them right now, Healthy Conversations. They're led by an individual within our company, Travis Christopherson, who's also extremely well known in the space, also well published. And so you can actually find us and follow us online in these areas. Next slide. So now we come to Aristotle. And so Aristotle is the major development from the StageZero side. And it is the first mRNA-based multi-cancer test panel that uses a single sample of blood. So this is not a finger prick or something like that. This is a normal set of tubes of blood, and we'll do that. We initially validated the Sentinel principle when we developed colon sentry, but I'll go back even before that. It was the work that we did with Pfizer, the work that we did with Eli Lilly. It was in the area of rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. From there, we moved to the cardiovascular side, which, for example, can find congestive heart failure. Think about that. We can take a blood test and we can tell you from your gene expression profiles whether you have or are developing congestive heart failure. It gets even a little better because as we move to the neuroscience area, what about being able to see Parkinson's or schizophrenia? Or in actual fact, the one that amazed me was major depression, that we can not only find it, but we can see it and we can track it over time. We were initially very, very interested in taking out the neuroscience side, but the neurologist told us we were too early. We were essentially giving them information for diseases they didn't really have good solutions to. So what do? We went to cancer, which is where we go. And it was the colon sentry product that we first brought through. We did the first 10,000 patient study in the space. We were the ones that showed point prevalence for colorectal cancer is 0.7%. We've since followed it up with over 100,000 commercial patients, and we've shown that the science is rock steady. Now that we have a platform, it becomes a much more straightforward process of being able to build on that. And so that's how we've added the additional cancers. We currently have 10 in there. We're expanding that out literally as we go now. But we're also going deep with them. So we're not trying to do 50 cancers. We don't think that's the right approach. We're going to limit it more to those where there is clear standard of care solutions, but we're also going deep. And so if I go to the colorectal cancer, for example, as we're now working it through, we're actually separating out not just colorectal cancer, no colorectal cancer, but within the colorectal cancer read, it's polyps, so grade 5, we're particularly interested in, the precancerous, or colorectal cancer is stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4. And so why is this important? Because if we tell the endoscopist what it is that they should be looking for, we know that they've got a greater chance of finding it. It's also helpful for the entire team as they work it up. It's helpful for the patients. Guess what? You've got G5 polyps, you've got stage 3 colorectal cancer. Makes a lot of difference. We believe we get much better outcomes. We know in addition to that, we can see right-sided lesions as well as left. Stool tests, for example, don't see right-sided lesions. And so you can continue through. And so we're building deeper on that. We're beginning the work on the breast cancer side now. And as we fully develop lung, we're going to do a similar thing with lung, and then we'll slowly work on down. So a more limited number of cancers, but a much greater degree of information that we can put in there. As we move further down, we will spend time evaluating that. Obviously, people want to look at remission, people want to look at minimal residual disease, all of those pieces on the drawing board, and we will come to them in due time. Next slide, please. This is the series that we do at this point. We're particularly thrilled with the female panel. Females typically are a little underserved in the medical space. In addition to that, they're typically a little more proactive, a little more concerned, a little more proactive about their health. So we think being able to provide them with the most common of the cancers that women get in one single swoop is a major advance. And we're starting to get very, very good uptake on this. That's not to denigrate males. I'm one of them. We obviously want to make sure we're taken care of as well. When we go to AVERT, AVERT is the follow-on from TREAT, and I'll talk about TREAT in a moment. But what we did was we took the learning from TREAT and we've pulled it forward. If we're now metabolic pathway disease experts, and if Padman was here and talking to the group, Pad would tell you that metabolic pathway disease is actually the precursor to cancer, and that you typically develop anywhere from 1 to 2 metabolic pathway disorders before you actually develop cancer. And so if you can find the metabolic pathways and you can intervene early, it's that even much earlier stage on cancer. But of course, you can begin to change the course of that. It's well known in breast cancer, for example, that if you come off of a high-fat diet, you go to a low-fat diet, you increase your exercise, you can actually change the trajectory. And so there's a lot of these. And so a lot of what we're doing there, and at 7 a.m. this morning, I was on a call with a group out of the UK asking if they could work with us on some very, very novel approaches. So part of what we'll do is we're going to begin to build these things out in a number of ways as we look to try and do this. If we can find it, the earlier we can find it, the better. We're getting positives on Aristotle right now that as we're working through, some of them are being confirmed as cancer, some of them are not. And as we're going through, the interesting thing is there are telltale signs that there is something there. As they're doing the workup, they're not saying, no, there's nothing here. They're saying, well, there may be something here, but our current methods are not picking them up. And so as we learned off of work in the lung cancer space, you get a positive off of this, you need to stay on active surveillance for at least the next couple of years. And you need to do it more frequently. And if it holds true in what we saw in some of the other work we did, then we will start to watch these cancers appear in ways that what I would call the normal tests can begin to pick them up and confirm them, and you move from there. Remember always, we're not diagnostic. For us, the diagnostic test is always the piece of tissue in front of the pathologist. It's the pathologist that diagnoses the cancer. So we're always the lead into that. So AVERT is extremely exciting. And it doesn't go just down the cancer pathway, but it goes down all of the metabolic pathway diseases as well. Next slide. So this is where the care oncology piece began. It started almost 20 years ago. It started with one of the founders of this. It was actually a family member of his that developed breast cancer. He was extremely unhappy with the way the treatment was being done. He thought there had to be a better way of doing this. And he started down the path of understanding all the metabolic pathway levers that both promoted growth, but also promoted death of tumors. And this is what led to all of the work that they've done. And so it's building out from there. The metric study is interesting. As a guide, as it points the way. But their initial work was done in glioblastoma, and they showed that they can significantly increase survival rates. So that's what it's about. There's a second paper in development now that actually builds on that. But they've now taken it out for a whole series of additional cancers, and it's holding pretty steady. So the COC protocol is patented. It's a version of that, or a variety of versions of that we would use within AVERT as well, and so pulls through. And again, going back to Mark's comment, this is absolutely bespoke. We will look at you. If you have cancer, you come to us to look for a better outcome. You don't come to us to look to replace standard of care. That's not what we're about. You work with your normal group on standard of care, and you then come to us, and we actually look to give you a better outcome, both in terms of tolerability, but obviously also looking to see if we can improve on survivability. If you are concerned about cancer, if you are a family member, you have a first-degree relative, and we had a whole series of people in the interviews where let's say dad's being diagnosed with cancer, would come with family for the first consultation, and you'd have a series of family members, notably the kids, say, well, what about me? What about me? I carry the same genes. Am I not at risk? How do I know? That's where Aristotle ties into it. That's where AVERT, as the entire program, ties into it. And yes, it's bespoke, and you track it down. The advantage to us on all of this, and let's go to the next slide. The advantage to us in all of this, and I'm going to go all the way back to where we started, which is to say, how do you introduce highly novel programs like this into the marketplace? Certainly for the last 2 years, you haven't been able to do the rep thing. They weren't being seen. Practices weren't open. Patients weren't going to practices. We saw a lot of the cancer screening drop off markedly. Colorectal cancer screening in the first few months of 2020 dropped off nearly 80%. So you can go through. So you have to have a different way of doing it. Telehealth part of that, absolutely critical. The next thing is you need solutions whereby you will hold people's hands all through this, whether it's the journey to get tested, which is a nervous one or in and of itself, through to getting the results back. If the results are negative, is that the end of it? You want to move forward to some preventative aspect. You get the bad news, which is positive, to make sure that you get the right diagnosis. Remember, all of our physicians are tied with major institutions. So to make sure that we can get you referred in, once you're fully diagnosed and you're on standard of care, we can then continue to work with you. And so it's that build all the way through it. And for us, it is multiple revenue streams. One of the really large competitors in the straight colorectal cancer space spends unbelievable amounts of money in terms of trying to obtain its prescriptions. If you analyze the data, you'll see that they're spending almost twice as much during the year in terms of the revenue that they're driving. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't spend 2 billion to make 1 billion. It doesn't work. In addition to that, they get something like 1.6 prescriptions per quarter per physician. That's not a way to build a business. In our case, when the patients come to us, they come to us and they stay with us for a period of time. We're not just getting the revenue that comes off of the tests, we're getting the revenue off of the consultations, we're getting the revenue off of any additional pieces. They come back to us quarter after quarter. And so it builds from that. So for us, it's just a much more rational, much more sensible way of doing it. And we think we're extremely well positioned going forward. So I'll hold at this point. And Matt, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, that'll work. Thanks, Jim. So much of what we've described so far obviously focuses on cancer patients and their families, right? If I could, I'd like to just take a minute and share with you a bit of a personal story about my experience. And back in 2016, I was responsible for leading and overseeing the financial aspects of oncology research and development at a really large pharmaceutical company. As a result, I was surrounded by a lot of the best, brightest scientists, oncologists, researchers, developers. And we were developing treatments for a variety of tumor types and using a variety of different methodologies, including immuno-oncology and antibody drug conjugates, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, all the cutting edge novel technologies that are being deployed today. And the fact is, this was at a time when my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, this was his third bout with a different type of cancer. He had throat cancer, in his mid 40s. He had prostate cancer in his mid 60s, and then pancreatic cancer in his 70s. And, despite all the resources that I had around me, and the people I could talk to and the advice I could get, it was the loneliest and scariest experience of my life. My dad was getting conflicting information from his oncologist, his primary oncologist, and his other oncologists. And, his care, assimilating it into a strategy was just difficult. It took a lot of time. And it was several weeks post his diagnosis when he finally had his first round of chemotherapy. And unfortunately, like many others, he passed rather quickly. It was literally a few days later. So why do we do what we do here at StageZero Life Sciences? It's because we're focused on improving outcomes, right? And we want to improve outcomes through early detection and intervention because we know that's going to change the paradigm. My dad, like I said, he had cancer a couple times before pancreatic took him. And monitoring his risk more closely, it might just have improved the possibility of detecting that pancreatic cancer a little earlier. It might just have resulted in a better outcome for him. But, the reality was this program wasn't available for him at that point in time. And, Jim made the comment a couple slides ago about the what about me, right? I sit here scratching my head. I've got young children, a wife, and obviously now my mom to provide for. I know, my dad and I live a different lifestyle. He had different behaviors than I did. But, the fact is we share a common genetic basis and probably some inherent genetic vulnerabilities as well. The Aristotle liquid biopsy test it provided me the insight and the opportunity to know what my risk was, right? And I've taken the test, and I've now have an insight into where I am. You wrap the AVERT consultation program and monitoring around that, and it assesses my unique circumstances to help me understand whether I'm progressing towards or regressing away from that risk of cancer or other chronic diseases. When you think about the TREAT program, as Jim described, it's just another opportunity to provide cancer patients adjuvant care. It's all it's about. It's providing an alternative, an additional piece of help. The ability to consult with an oncologist via a telehealth platform, answering questions and potentially prescribing a regimen of therapeutics that may improve the outcome. It's huge for patients who are hoping for an alternative. So we do what we do because we know it helps to address an unmet medical need, and it's helping to shape or reshape the paradigm in healthcare today. So let's flip over to the next slide. And the fact is, the last 2 years have demonstrated this critical need for easily accessible early cancer detection. This is just one more demonstration for how medical needs are being addressed in novel ways. COVID interrupted everything from routine monitoring of mammograms, colonoscopies, and prostate exams to your regular general practitioner having a consultation and an annual physical. But as a result, patients are now presenting at a later stage when there are fewer treatment options, and cancer mortality as a result is much higher. Easier access to non-invasive cancer risk detection is imperative. And as Jim described earlier, Aristotle is that product that's uniquely positioned to address this clinical unmet need. If you can turn to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about, what have people done to get to medical care in a COVID-19 world? Well, the answer is pretty easy to see. It's evident. Patients are turning to telehealth solutions nearly 40 times more than they did prior to the pandemic. But what's more important, as you see to the right-hand side of the graph on the left, is that this is sustained, right? Investors are seeing the same thing, and the opportunity is for them. They've doubled their investment in the last several years, and they continue to. And for reasons, as you can clearly see, the revenues are doubling as well, right? And if we turn to the next slide and we just take a look at where the market sectors are and where they're going. Global telehealth is intended to be nearly $500 billion market by 2026. And early diagnostics are expected to represent nearly $250 billion in the same period. We all know liquid biopsy. It continues to become an ever more appealing alternative for early, accurate, and non-invasive cancer risk detection. And we expect that to continue as well. While we'd be well positioned in any one of these subsectors alone, we're obviously positioned in all three of them simultaneously. And they're among the fastest growing and most exciting sectors in healthcare today. The unmet medical need that our solution addresses is evident, and the market opportunity is clearly indisputable. But that brings me to the more exciting part of what we're doing, right? And this is our, where we are today isn't as important as where we plan on going tomorrow. And our long-term growth strategy focuses on three distinct principles. The first of which is to deepen our capabilities, followed by broadening our offerings, and then lastly, by expanding our reach. And when we think about, deepening our capabilities first, we're investing in Aristotle's ability to detect additional tumor types and increasing our ability to assess not only whether we can detect cancer yes or cancer no, but potentially even the stage of where that cancer is. As Jim described earlier, we're looking at how we take what the technology we have in hand and build upon it. And so we're also enhancing the clinical offerings. I'm sorry, I got lost on the slide here. The clinical offerings, first, making sure that we not only provide oncologists and physicians, but we're looking to include nutritionists, physiologists, and other medical disciplines as well. As we talk about broadening our offerings, we think about the gene signature platform that we've built, the Sentinel principle. As Jim described, it has capabilities for years ago where, we can expand well beyond oncology. We intend to develop the gene signatures that we can detect and potentially better understand the risk of developing cardiovascular disease, metabolic diseases, autoimmune diseases, and even neurological diseases in the future. And so correspondingly, we'd look to add physicians and scientists to our AVERT program and our overall research group to meet the needs of patients as, at risk for other chronic illnesses as well. And so lastly, when it comes to expanding our reach, this involves the integration of machine learning and artificial intelligence into our clinical practice, and that'll allow us to further optimize the clinical solutions for our patients. We're working to establish key relationships in strategically important regional centers and to facilitate the global deployment of our integrated laboratory and telehealth solutions. So how are we going to do this? If we can go over to the next slide. We've built a long-term strategy and have begun to invest in both the commercial and the R&D growth platform simultaneously. In the beginning of the presentation, Jim described, we commercially launched the AVERT program and the Aristotle program in the United States last year, and they're building momentum. We launched Aristotle in Canada in the fourth quarter last year, and we've been delighted to see some of its uptake. We continue to make considerable investments in digital marketing and are constantly monitoring our brand and online consumer sentiment. We're planning the expansion of our TREAT and AVERT clinical programs into other countries in Europe and Canada, for that matter. We also continue to build critical relationships with clinics, healthcare practices, self-insured corporations, and others as we address the unmet medical needs of patients via our telehealth platforms and our liquid biopsy testing. With respect to the research and development angle, we're investing in next generation sequencing to deepen and broaden Aristotle's capabilities. We've begun to design clinical systems that will provide us an opportunity to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence and integrate it into our clinical practice. These investments are critical to our ability to achieve the goal, which is improving patient outcomes through early detection and intervention. And so if we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the investment thesis for StageZero Life Sciences. It's made up of a few critical pieces. First, early cancer detection with Aristotle represents a paradigm shift and a tremendous commercial opportunity. You couple that with the global telehealth platform that allows our clinical practitioners boundless opportunity to engage in patients globally. And then our experienced management team, we know how to build global biobrands, and it's supported by this scientific advisory board, which is perfectly matched to our ambitions. And they're some of the most well-respected industry-leading medical and scientific leaders in the world. Moreover, the vertical integration aspects of what we're trying to do, it's patient-centric solutions. It provides synergies that accelerate top-line growth. And so, lastly, we really believe our disruptive approach to healthcare enhances patient care, it improves efficiency, clearly increases adherence, and it lowers the overall cost to the system. So with that, I'll just close by saying thank you for listening to our presentation, and it'd be our pleasure to answer any questions that you have right now.
Thank you, Matt. And James, appreciate it. Company's obviously well positioned, in our opinion, to become a leader in early diagnosis of cancer and other illnesses. And, with what the market's done here in the last month or so, I think it's really created a buying opportunity for the company. So I suggest everybody really take a long, hard look at the stock. They have a lot of great things happening right now. It looks like 2022 will be a pivotal year for the company. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, I think the simplest way is to type it into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that it gets answered. So I'll wait for a few questions here to be queued up.
One thing we usually see on these webcasts that come down the aisle, or we sort of joke, it's 2 men in a drug, it's 2 men in a new pharmaceutical agent, something like that. This is radically different to that. I think you'd agree. It's kind of an interesting conflation of things that they're offering. And what I see it about is, when I was practicing medicine, I just saw all these unsustainable forces, costs, diagnostic needs, patient dissatisfaction, all coming to bear, and they were going to eventually break the bearer's back one way or another. It was inevitable, and I really congratulate this company on having, over the years, contrived a novel system that actually works and trumps the present standard of care. I predict if you compared their care with markers of care or checklist type systems, I think you'd see this one as a winner. And it's not your most mainstream investment. It's probably not what you came to us shopping to invest in, but that doesn't mean I would mark it off the list, because it's pretty original.
That's our intent, is to be very different, right? We're changing the paradigm. Everybody else is following it, right? And that's clearly our intent, is to change the way that healthcare is delivered. I see a question in the Q&A here talking about the revenue statements by quarter. Clearly, we haven't filed and published our year-end financial statements yet, but I'm happy to share with you. You can go on to CDAR and pull down our financial statements for the third quarter. We had a year-to-date revenue of about $3.6 million. So, there's revenue coming in. The vast majority of that is in our laboratory. If you recall, we mentioned that we acquired Care Oncology in September of last year. And so it did contribute 1 month of revenue in that period. And you can see that in the, in the period end.
Great. Thank you. So can you talk a little bit about what you think the year-over-year growth for screenings will be, going forward? Do you have a number in mind?
Maybe I can do that. I don't know that we have a number in mind. It's more a matter of getting back to a degree of normality. So if you go across, two things have happened during COVID. One is the delay of screening. So if you talk to the oncologists, and you can talk to our oncologists or anyone out there, people talk typically about facing an absolute tsunami, using their words, absolute tsunami of late stage cancers right now. So things are coming forward really in a very poor state. As a result of that, everyone knows that we've got to get back to early screening. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of catch up. And so typically what it is, we don't already, if you look at endoscopy suites, we don't have enough endoscopy suites to cater to everyone as it is. But you need better ways of screening it. So are we going to go back to sort of, let's say, 2019 level screening, which was extremely considerable? At least, I think the answer is at least. Are we going to see 1.5 times that, 2 times that to begin with? Yes, probably we are, because I think everyone's starting to get back to trying to do it. And screening in general was down anywhere from 50 to 94% across the past 2 years. So huge opportunity as everyone comes back to it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, James. Another question that came in the chat is a really good one. Obviously, when we talk about, where the stock is trading now, question is a lot of great moving parts here. What should we look for in the near-term future to close the disconnect we currently see in the market?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, we're Canadian, we're TSX listed, we've been mostly retail investor held. We're moving into working with larger funds, larger groups. So I think as you look at building that out, we're working with the investment banks now. So clearly what I would look for is the move to the larger funds, because it should dictate a different trading pattern. And I think that pretty much everyone we talk to out there says the same thing, major disconnect in terms of what we are, what we're doing. And Matt will walk you through, even just on a forward multiple on revenue we're totally out of whack. So we know that. So one is begin to sort of, I won't say change out the investor base, that's not what I mean, but to get more of a presence in the US. And that is certainly happening. The second thing is, I think everyone's looking for the revenue just to begin to bite. And so as we talk about the multiple revenue streams, we'll start to lay them out, and I think people can begin to build it. We're clearly at this point not putting out forecasts, but as we become much more mature, we'll start to do that.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, right, Anthony and Mark, is that the reality is you do the right things and the right things happen. And so I don't know that you would think that we will change what we've been doing. If you look at the news flow or just what we've accomplished in 2021, we've done a lot of the right things, building partnerships, building capabilities, launching products, designing products, right? So I think you'll continue to see some of the same activity, and we'll continue to communicate what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we're accomplishing our ambitions. To Jim's earlier point, when you look at where we are with respect to the value of the company, many companies like us trade at a 15 to 20 times multiple to top line revenues. You don't have to be a wizard to do the math. You can use my third quarter numbers. It's, we're nowhere near it. And I think there's part of that is some of what Jim mentioned, this understanding for what our business case really truly is and how we are accomplishing it with every single thing we do. Every day we're focused on it. If it's not broadening the capabilities of the tests, it's broadening the geography in which they're offered. That is exactly what we're doing every single day. And one other piece to be mindful of, this company, you think about 2021's accomplishments, and a finance guy like me looks at accomplishments, and I always have to assess, well, what's the return on the investment? What would it have cost the company to do all of those things? And the reality is this company, over the course of the last 5 years, has raised just over $25 million. That's it. $25 million, launched a couple of products, right? Acquired and integrated another company, went from 20 people to 80, right? These initiatives, they take vastly more investment than that, typically. Why were we able to do it better and cheaper? Well, it's part of the experience of our management team and strategic vision that Jim has, but it's also the capabilities of the team. We're small but mighty, we're capable. And so we'll continue to deploy those same ambitions, those same initiatives. And I would expect in time, as we bring in some of those larger, institutional investors in the United States, they're clearly going to see what we're trying to do and value it differently.
I agree,
Absolutely.
Matthew. And I think the approach it's sort of an answer to prayer, really, because Anthony and I work with a lot of companies at all stages, including much more embryonic than yours in terms of their development stage. And the investor mentality so often is radical, scorch and burn profits, and we're going to drop that by the wayside unless that can be bringing in $1 billion in a year. And there are more important answers to that question than I think you all stumbled onto. I congratulate you for having the kind of perspicacity to see that and to continue growing it this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looked like 2021 definitely laid the foundation for future success for sure. It's a very important year for the company. You guys got a lot accomplished.
As you said, you just keep doing it the right way. I think the script kind of begins just writing itself for you. It brings about your own good end.
Absolutely. In terms of expanding your offerings, how is it costly what's the process for adding new cancers to the screenings? Like, how does that process work?
Jim, you
I'll
want to
take that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll fill in the gaps where we can.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of the system. It really is, because it's the better part of 15, 20 years to develop the platform. Now what you get to do is you get to add the additional pieces in a fairly straightforward way. And so for us, on a simple method, if you want to take the absolute least, the lowest bar in terms of that, it's simply taking a statistically significant number of patients that meets the regulatory requirements and actually applying it to each of the cancers. We just add it on that way. We know the system. It's pretty straightforward. We take a series of patients that have the cancer. We develop the gene expression profile from that. The controls are not only normals, but the controls are every other cancer that we've ever run, as well as every other disease that we've run. And I'm going to pick on this last point because it's critical. The difference between immune disorders and, for example, like rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease, and perhaps colorectal cancer may not immediately be evident. If you haven't run all three and you can't actually contrast one against the other, there's the chance you can get them confused. And this is one of the issues. If you look at our competitors, why are they saying cancer, no cancer? Yeah, if there's cancer, now we'll try and tell you which area of the body it's coming from. It's because they don't have this kind of data. They haven't gone there. It's 20 years worth of work. They're only 5, 6, 7 years down the road. They got a long way to go yet. We've done all that. And so we don't need 100,000 patients. We don't need 10,000 patients. We can literally do this on sub 1,000 patients around this, and sometimes we can do it on hundreds as you bring it out. It depends upon how good the data is. So it builds very rapidly. Why? Because the platform's validated.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant to really articulate the idea that end-stage dysmetabolism is what we call cancer by any other name. It's rarely put so eloquently, right? But that's what it is.
Yep. Really is. If you had some of our oncologists or Padman on here, they would be very eloquent in terms of walking through. If you're going to get this kind of cancer, these are probably the things you're going to see ahead of time. We need, and you're going to go look for them, and you've got to build it together, and then you go. And then you can also get to interfere. So if I can interfere ahead of time, if I know that I'm heading in that direction, can I begin to interfere now to look for a better outcome already? And that's the evidence that's building.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing to point out that not everybody wants to find the solution in the bottom of a prescription pill bottle, right? You know,
Yeah.
and that's in fact when it's too late, right? You're already treating that condition, that disease. And that's hard to change when you're in therapy like that. The AVERT program is designed to avert the risk of getting there to begin with, right? We have the capacity, we have the capability to know and better understand our own biological systems, personal biological systems, and we know the mechanics by which we can manage and mitigate the risk of disease progression. Now it's a matter of getting that into the mainstream, so not every solution is found in the bottom of a pill bottle.
Absolutely. I think that's a good spot to end it today. I want to thank everyone, the team from StageZero and Mark Swain for coming on today to get us up to speed on the company. Obviously, a lot of exciting things happening. If your questions weren't answered today, or if you have a question after the meeting that comes to you, please feel free to email me and we'll make sure that it gets answered. In the meantime, you can get additional information on StageZero Life Sciences at the company's comprehensive website, StageZeroLifeSciences.com, including details on the company's current cancer and COVID diagnostic testing, as well as additional information and press releases. The code word today for feedback purposes is Marlin, M-A-R-L-I-N, like the fish. I'll be sending the feedback link out after this meeting. Your timely feedback is greatly appreciated. Obviously, a lot of exciting things happening with this company, and we feel that they are going to be leaders in this space for quite some time. And not only that, telehealth and everything surrounding it is expected to boom here in the coming year. So really excited for the future of this company, and we think 2022 will certainly be a pivotal year for the company. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll leave it there. And until next time, everybody be safe and be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Toby. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.